Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Bachnight coming to you. I hope everything is okay. Before we get into everything, I want to review what's going on here in the class. So it is week 6, and we are going to get into biodiversity and conservation of biology. Um, so this week you have read this chapter 8 in current event research, and please note an exam is going to be posted on the 14th of next week, and you will have until Wednesday. Oops, you will have until Wednesday the 21st. What just happened to that? I'm on the wrong week. I'm on week 9. You'll have until the 21st. So next week, next Wednesday, when you hand in your Wednesday assignment, you'll see that this test here, that is in week 7, will be. Oh, where is it? Oh, it's week 8. It's like, what the heck am I doing? I'm in the wrong weeks here. This test that's showing up right here, exam 1, is going to show up on the 14th, right here, all right? And then you'll have until the 21st to take it, all right? I hope I'm getting my dates right. I'm all confused, but this is how I have it on Blackboard, right? So it's going to pop up. This is going to pop up on the 14th, and you have the 21st to take it, and you will not have an assignment due on this day because you don't have the next one. Oh, let's look at week 6. I think is the crazy pod. Was that week 7? Is the crazy pod contest? All right, crazy town contest is here on week 7. All right, when you're supposed to be taking a test. So if you look and see, this is not due until the 21st. Okay, and then week 9 is not due until November 4th. Or wrong day. Week 9 is not due until November 4th. Okay, so you have homework assignment for this Wednesday and then next Wednesday, which is 2 current events, I believe. And then will have the test due by next Wednesday, and then you will do the podcast. Okay, and the test is just going to be on everything from weeks 1 through 6. We're not going to get into the economics part, all right, which is I guess week 7, right? Yeah. So it's going to be on biodiversity, climate change, something or other. I can't remember what this was. Evolution, population ecology, and matter and basic science and intro to environmental science. Okay, so just the first 6 weeks will be on the test that pops up on Wednesday, week 7. All right, and then you have Wednesday till week 8 to take it. All right, and remember, there's no Wednesday current event or podcast. Everything goes next week. All right, and I hope I have all those dates right. I'm getting so confused here. But we'll make it. We'll make it through here. All right. So let's get into this next presentation. This is going to be about biodiversity. Right? You'll hear me say a couple times. Biodiversity is so important because without biodiversity, you'll never have resilience, and without resilience, you'll never have sustainability. Okay, and what I mean by that is in Mother Nature, the more biodiverse a certain biome or area is, an ecosystem is, the more resilient it is, and if in that resilience makes it last longer and longer. Okay, so if there's a big disaster in some little area, the more biodiversity it has, the better chance it has for that one little mammal to rise up and take over the world. Okay, just like it happened way back with the dinosaurs. Okay, so that's why biodiversity is so important. It's not so a certain species can live; it's just so life can continue, basically. All right, we can sustain life here on Earth, and that life doesn't have to be humans. Okay, maybe the dinosaurs will come back. Who knows? Okay, but that's neither here nor there. I don't think that's going to happen. But right now, we have been saying that scientists have been saying that we are actually in what they call the next mass extinction. All right, and this one is actually caused by humanity, and it's kind of sad. All right, this video right here you're about to see is a guy in the Kiki Kakuku or something like that. I know I'm butchering his name, and he is wrote a book, Physics of the Future, is pretty good. If you want to read it, he's actually spoken here on campus during the Robert Morris speaker days. All right, he's really a good dude. But let's watch this video. And I want you to pay attention because I do this video. There's a lot of videos on the Nest Max extension, but I really enjoy this one because um, they have in the background, all right, these comets coming down and smashing the Earth. Okay, but unfortunately, what the Kiki is talking about has nothing to do with a comet coming down and smashing the Earth. He's talking about us, folks. He's talking about humanity. And Fox News, or that's who's doing this, needs to, in the background, not put a meteor strike, but all the bulldozers, scraping off the tops of the mountaintops, all right, about all the urban sprawl that we have done, all the pollution in the ocean, those kind of things. Because this next mass extinction is not caused by natural disaster. Okay, this next extinction is being caused by us, and we can count what we are taking out of the ecosystem, the biodiversity loss. All right, so let's watch this video of here.
Well, so far, if you analyze the last few hundred years of life on the Earth, human activity apparently has wiped out 1.4% of all plant and animal species, and it is 100 to 1,000 times faster than normal because of
And we talked about that. There's a
deforestation,
background extinction rate.
development, pollution, overharvesting. And if you take a look at a zoo, many of the zoo animals that our children love, we may find them going extinct. The tiger, for example, may go extinct. Many of the familiar zoo animals, bears, and realize that 18,000 species are at risk. Yeah, climate change is also involved in this thing. Independent of where climate change comes from, we see that the seasons are changing. Summers are getting longer, winters are getting shorter on average. And we always say that the early bird catches the worm, but that assumes that the worm and the bird are synchronized. Many of these cycles, the natural cycles, are being thrown into disarray, meaning, for example, droughts in China going on right now, perhaps famine in certain areas. So we humans cannot be divorced from what's happening in the natural world.
Remember, this was done in 2011. So this was actually before the big California and Texas droughts that we had, and still going on.
Well, evolution says survival of the fittest.
And look at the
So far, we
meteors.
humans are among the
What are they
fittest.
doing?
But we are also
Put
at
up
the
the
top of the food
bulldozers.
chain, the top of the pyramid, and it wouldn't take much to dislodge us from being at the top of the food chain. Well, in science fiction, of course, the insects take over. But look at something very simple. We are dependent on just a few crops, wheat, rice, and just a few crops. And if a blight were to wipe out these crops, then a huge chunk of humanity would starve to death because there's so
Our
many crops
biodiversity in our
that
food
plant
is not too good
food.
either. We'll talk about that more in the agricultural section.
We should be wary of overharvesting. For example, overharvesting the oceans. We have drag nets, which in principle could drag the entire oceans. That's how efficient our technology is. Also, wheat production we have to worry about because water is the key to wheat production. And there are going to be perhaps water wars in the future with flooding an area. Well, there'll always be water on the earth. The question is the cost and what it would take to extract it, to desalinate it, to divert it, to irrigate. And so the cost of certain kinds of commodities could start to rise. So just because we're at the top of the food chain doesn't mean that we're invulnerable to what's happening outside where biodiversity is being threatened. Well, that's in science fiction.
Yeah, and that's not a good idea. We need the cockroaches. They are important biodegraders for us. They take care of all our garbage. So we can't get rid of all of them. But my suggestion to her was always to clean your apartment. Okay. So they don't have anything with food to eat. But he's talking about the biodiversity, and we are it's 1,000 times faster than normal. Where we talked about the background extinction rate in the past, and lo and behold, here it is today. We can track thousands of animals becoming extinct due to our different things. And he, went over. I call it the hippo. All right, the extinction is happening because of the hippo. Is uh, habitat loss, invasive species, pollution, population, and overharvesting. Okay, and we need to add an extra one on there, C, for climate change, because he talked about the bird and the insect being synchronized. And we're seeing a lot of that in today's world is that one little tiny degree of temperature is changing how the bird and the worm get together. And it's not too good. All right, they're not synchronized up, and when you lay your eggs and there's no insects to feed your little chicks, what are you going to do? All right, so it's becoming a mess, and we need to really start addressing that too. And that's what we're going to talk about next chapter with economics is how we, decide how society can, have a couple suggestions of how we actually help protect biodiversity. We'll talk a little bit about that also in this chapter too. So first, we're going to talk about the scope of the burst. First, we're going to get a nice case study. Then we're going to talk about the scope of the burst diversity, the benefits of biodiversity, the extinction crisis that we're going through right now. All right, and then we'll talk about the causes. All right, the HIPPO acronym, and then we'll talk about conservation of how are we going to protect all these native species. Okay, but this is a tough decision. All right, of how we do this because we want to um, protect the animals out there, but we also want to have a good economy, right? We want people to be able to prosper. And some animals are a little bit different than other animals. Okay, some animals use a huge swath of land, and they're called an umbrella species. So millions of wildebeest and zebras and antelope migrate across Africa during the change of the wet season. That's just been the natural ways that they go. All right, and that's through a whole bunch of different lands. Okay, and there's a tribe called the Massey people who are native to this area region, and they follow these herds, and they have been living sustainable lives for generations. All right, they are not putting out all that carbon, and they have been very good. I mean, they've had some recently. There's been some very bloody battles, to put it kindly, I guess, out there. So there's some big disputes going on in that region. But the Serengeti is where all these wildebeest live, and and migrate, and where the Maasai actually live. And the Serengeti includes two protected areas that fall between two different countries, Tanzania and Kenya. Right, and those two countries need to work together to be able to uh, preserve this range. All right. So the reserve have effectively isolated people living in the northern parts of Tanzania. So here you see this northern parts here, and there's the range. So no one can really get here. They have to go all the way around to get to the northern parts of Tanzania. There's not really a way to get to the area. All right. The Tanzanian president promised to build a paved commercial highway through the Serengeti, connecting these communities. He was just going to take a little shortcut right through here. All right. Um, to the east of the Indian River. So they wanted to be able to get a little bit closer. Okay. And this plan raised many concerns with the conservationists. So the migration routes will be blocked by for the wildebeest. All right. Many animals will die because of traffic collisions now, because now there's cars. Just like we have deer, wildebeest are gonna be running in front of your car. All right. Poachers will have better access to the area, so all the endangered species that are in the Serengeti area now have, the poachers can go out there, in and out, nice, easy travel. All right. And human development would be accelerated around the edges of the reserves. All right. So once you put in the highway, there's going to be the gas stations and the convenience stores and Sunoco's and all the restaurants and hotels for all that stuff's just gonna start exploding in that area. Just the way it is. All right. So the East African Court of Justice blocked the plan, and an alternative route was wrapped around the other southern part of the Serengeti. It was planned, so they went around this way instead. Right? Instead of going through, this is what they wanted to do, nice and short, to get to the uh, access to the ocean here. Okay, so they decided to have to take the longer way around, all right, to get to it. Okay. In 2016, a new president announced plans to build an oil pipeline through the Serengeti now. So now there's sparking even many of the same protests and same concerns are happening now because they want to put in a pipeline. Okay, and you hear that pipeline stuff here in America, right? Uh, the Keystone XL pipeline, DAPL, baby. Those Indians, those people my son hung out with in the first presentation way back when on day one. We met all those people in Washington, D.C. and went and lobbied with them to try to do something about climate change. It was fun. Very exciting. Very good group of people. But this happens also here in the United States. Okay? Just not the Serengeti. So biodiversity is a variety of life across all levels of biological organizations. So the genes through the ecosystem. All right, so we have a lot of different kinds of biodiversity. And a species is defined as a set of organisms that share unique characteristics and can breed and produce fertile offspring. That is the key to a species. Produce fertile offspring. Okay. There's not too many, there's a couple. There's a Negra, the combination between the tiger and the lion, right? But my favorite one is the donkey and the horse, right? Which comes out with the mule. I think it's donkey's is the species, and the mule is the hybrid between the donkey and the horse. And there's only one way to do it. I think the male donkey has to mate with a male horse, or I don't know. It can only be done one way to have the offspring. Okay. But we saw the horse, and the horse is nice and gentle, right? It's gentle and it's strong, and it comes to us, and we can domesticate it, right? But the donkey, pound for pound, the donkey is like super strong. It's a lot stronger than the horse is. But the problem is, we call the donkey a jackass for a reason, right? Because it's ornery. So we thought way back when, maybe if we combine the two, we can have a nice, strong, docile animal that we can actually domesticate. And it worked out pretty good. I mean, mules are good animals. They're healthy, and they're nothing wrong with them. It's just that they are not a species because they cannot produce any live fertile offspring. And you can decide whether, we've got to talk about ethics right there too. So you can decide ethically whether or not you think it's a good idea to get a horse and a donkey together to have an offspring so we can have another animal. All right? But that's your ethical beliefs. Science says it's possible, and you got to decide in what kind of ethics do you have, whether you don't want to promote that or not. Or I just leave it alone, all right? Because I don't think the donkey is, or the mule is, a bad animal to have around. Okay? Life is very diverse on Earth. So species diversity describes the number of variety of species found in an area. So all the different species in one single area. All right? Species richness describes the number of species. Okay, all the different species, the number of species, and evenness or relative abundance describes how much the species differ from each other in a number of individuals. All right, relative abundance describes how the species differ from each other in numbers of individuals. So we're talking about the DNA inside all these kudos, the DNA inside of you. Okay, so we got ecosystem diversity. Okay, we have species diversity, all the different species, and then we have the diversity within inside the species, which is basically the DNA inside of those individuals. And genetic diversity includes the difference between DNA composition among individuals. So populations with little genetic diversity are more likely to suffer from inbreeding, depressions, and be vulnerable to environmental changes as the lack of variations need to help adapt to new conditions. So the lack of genetic diversity is very tough on a species. It can breed bad blood, to say the least. You might hear about this about some of the ancients who were always marrying the brothers and sisters were always getting married, and sooner or later, those bloodlines, those people started going a little wacky. They were not exactly the best of the best of humans. And they were getting deformation because the genetic makeup was not getting mixed up enough. All right, so it's very important that we have genetic diversity within inside a species population too. And we can see that with inside the humans, but we also see it with inside dogs. I don't know how many of you are purebred doggists, and I love my purebred dogs, but some purebred dogs come with problems. If you have a big one, hip dysplasia is always very prevalent, right, in those dogs, in like Labrador retrievers and stuff. So you can imagine if that hip displacement was kept on being passed over and over to the next generation, that dog wouldn't last because they couldn't be able to catch the prey that they needed. Make sense? Ecosystems diversity refers to the number and variety of ecosystems, communities, and habitats. So each ecosystem can have a lot of diversity. It could be little, I call them microclimates. Sometimes you might hear that little saying. So in each little ecosystem, there could be little tiny microclimates and communities and habitats along the river's edge, underneath the canopy. Okay. Some groups of organisms include more species than others. So insects, for example, are the most diverse group of organisms. More insects out there than we can actually count. They are the be all, them all, and they may just possibly take over the earth if we ever leave. Okay, because they have that biodiversity to survive if there's a big another meteor strike. But you can see here animals, all different species aren't really, there's a lot of different animals, but when you look down here, the vertebrates have a lot more insects, 1 million, right? And then the vertebrates, and then you got the fishes, right? And reptiles and birds, okay, that are all inside the animals. So the animals are also insects, but they are the biggest. And then what we call animals sometimes is the second biggest. Biodiversity also varies based on location. Right? So species richness generally increases as one approaches the equator due to a lot of good things, right? So the greater geographic area, there's more land mass and more water mass because the Earth is the biggest around the equator. All right, more solar energy. The Earth drives on sun. All energy comes from the sun, and the sun is always, hitting the equator. But lo and behold, up north, right, they have days with no sunlight for a long time, right? So there's more energy for that biodiversity to thrive. Stability of the tropical climates. It's always a nice little 78 degrees or whatever the temperature is down there. So you don't have large swings and variation. And there's lack of disruptive glacial events. All right, so you remember New York was once wiped out by a glacier. All right, we would have to be the snowball Earth to get a glacier all the way down the equator. Species diversity also tends to increase in areas with more diverse habitats. Okay, so like I said, back here when we were talking about where they can live, ecosystem diversity, a lot of different communities and habitats. There's a lot of different places for animals to hide, like in the tropical rainforest. They got caves and a canopy, and on top of the canopy and underneath the canopy and different layers of the trees. And they got all these different areas to have life share, or what do we call that in the last thing? They, to cooperate with each other. And that's what, Darwin actually saw a lot of times, how the birds were partitioning the tree. All right, they kind of partition the rainforest as well in all these different kinds of communities. Structural diversity habitats like forests are generally more biodiverse because you go up and you can go down. So far, about 1.8 million species of plants, animals, and organisms have been identified, but there's probably about 3 to 100 million more that we have no idea that are out there, especially in the oceans. We know more about the moon than we do about the ocean. Okay, but we're always finding some more. Um, our species knowledge is incomplete because most of the unknown species are so small, such as bacteria and roundworms and fungi and protists. I mean, the soil scientists out there that are studying, we'll talk about regenerative agriculture, and that's bringing the life back to the soil. I mean, there's just so much stuff in that soil. They're kind of always finding some new stuff, but it's just so teeming on life, and you can't really see it. So to really document all this stuff, and you pick up one little square, not even one little spoonful of soil is just like taking a spoonful of water out of the ocean and looking to see how much life is in that water. Sort of makes sense because there's a lot of soil out there, and it could be a lot of different bacterias. Other organisms may appear to be the same species, but are found to be different under further examination. There's a moth that looks just like the monarch butterfly, but it's a totally different species. The two cannot have live fertile offspring. But if you get the same species together, they can. Biodiverse regions provide many benefits, such as potential new or unused food sources, wild relatives of crops. We readily use or provide genetic diversity to protect against disease. So, a lot of times, um, one of the things that really concerns me is that we don't have a big enough, a diverse food source. I mean, the guy Niki Kaku talked about how we live on wheat, corn, and rye and soy. Right, we have basically 4 crops that is in all of our processed food, and we need to diversify a little bit more because if one of those has a blight, then we are in big trouble. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the agricultural section. Okay, but the wild relatives of crops we already use provide a lot of diversity for us. Okay. Table below is listing promising new food sources in Central America. So the cabarate, the Vinci, right, all these different food sources. There's a lot. We used to eat a lot of different things in our society. Okay, there's this thing called parslane. And I remember one of my workers when I was running my CSA, she came back and said, "Hey, try this." And I'm like, I started eating. She was like, "You like that?" I'm like, "Yeah, it has a little lemon taste to it." She goes, "Yeah, I picked it out of my gutter." And then parslane's like a weed that we used to always eat, and it runs a gamut of all the vitamins, and it actually tastes pretty good. So I started giving it out to my shareholders in the bags I was given for my CSA. And one time I was at the farmers market, and used to cook up some of the vegetables and stuff and give free samples out. And this one lady tasted it. She bought a whole bunch, and she came back like an hour later and said, "You know what? I'm having some of this for my dinner party next week." And she scooped up the rest of my parslane and took it home with her and uh, fed it to her crowd. But it is a weed that she can grow. It grows right in your garden. I mean, you've seen this parslane, and you'll never know that it's an edible and actually delicious food. Okay. Also, about half of today's pharmaceuticals are derived from chemical compounds in wild plants. Right? There's nothing out there. No medicine is just magically just appears. We have actually, as society, have extracted these out of the plants. Right? Yeah, some agent had a headache and sucked on a leaf and it went away, and voila, we got aspirin. Right? Or they were sucking on a leaf and they had a little bit extra adrenaline. Voila, we got cocaine. Right? All of our medicine is derived from these different plants. So we don't know what's out there. And if we lose something due to biodiversity, we might lose the cure for cancer. And for me, that is not a good thing to happen because I directly wouldn't mind curing cancer. But I don't know if that's the cure or not. I'm just saying there's a lot of medicine out there. It all comes from plants. Biodiversity provides many free benefits also. Right, so we got all our food, our fuel, our fiber, and shelter from biodiversity. It cleans the air, purifies the water. Biodiversity is the ecological service. I mean, that biodiversity is what drives those ecological services. All those things in Mother Nature working together, right? Stabilizing the climate, pollinating our plants, controlling the pests and diseases, maintaining genetic diversity of crops, and cultural and aesthetic benefits. I mean, it is amazing how it all is tied together. That we talked about the connection of everything. Nothing is wasted in nature. And if we take out one of those things with inside that circle of light, then we might have that tropic cascade that we talked about in chapter whatever. All right, one thing taken out, and a thing that could ripple through the whole food web and the whole ecosystem, changing everything that we've known forever. But like I said, biodiversity increases resilience. And with that resilience, we can help with our sustainability. Okay? So biodiversity increases the resilience of an ecosystem's ability to withstand a disturbance and recover from stress and adapt to change. Okay? So, the more biodiversity we have, when we have a disruption or a stressor event, the ecosystem can bounce back. It might not be the way it was before, but at least it has a chance to bounce back. So there's what's called a keystone species, and we talked about this before. A keystone species is crucial to the environment. We talked about the otter and the sea urchin and the kelp plants, right? But it's also if we lose the top predator, like the wolf, the consequences will cascade down the entire food chain. The Pacific Northwest little kelp forests will collapse without the otter and sea urchins and the kelp. And the Yellowstone totally changed in front of our eyes when we took out the top predator, the gray wolf. So if an ecosystem engineer is lost, the entire structure of the ecosystem can change. Removing elephants from some of the African savanna has caused scrub vegetation to overgrow, turning them into scrub forests. So, it's not just here in the United States, it's also in Africa and in Canada. Biodiversity losses all over the place, and we're learning the hard way what happens when we take out a keystone species out of an area. And we're starting to recognize that and try to fix it a little bit more. Visitors to natural areas spend money at local businesses and hire local guides to support parks that employ restaurants. So, residents. So, Tanzania does what's called ecotourism, which provides a quarter of the foreign money entering that economy. And I love ecotourism. And ecotourism is just, instead of tearing down the rainforest or the savanna and farming it, they hire the local individuals tribesmen to talk about the Serengeti. And they take us people, rich guys around or people around and for tours. And I get to see the Serengeti from the view of someone that actually lives there and knows it. And, all the other different things. So ecotourism really works in these areas. And it actually brings down the poaching. Because a lot of these people who are out there poaching need some food. And they're out poaching so they can make some money. So instead of going out and poaching the animals, they're going out and protecting the animals. And we're paying them because they're actually earning a service. It's it's a free market, okay? And Tanzania is not the only one. Another great country in South America that I like, one of my favorite case studies is Costa Rica, right? And that we always talk about how bad some of the countries are in South America, and we the immigration stuff, all this stuff, okay? What I firmly believe, if they could model not off the United States, but off of Costa Rica, because they're more like those people, right? They have the cultures a little bit more the same, and they have the biomes, and they have the beautiful area that Costa Rica is using for their ecotourism, and that is a huge part of their economy, and it's working real well, right? I mean, it is really doing. Costa Rica is like a model for all of South America, I believe, and us. All right, but we have ecotourism too, because we have the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone National Park, all those kind of things are ecotourism here in the United States, but we just don't call it that. All right. People have value connections with nature, and this is important to to understand that there is a connection. Some people don't believe it, but I sure the heck do. All right, and there's a biologist named Edward O. Norton that suggested this is called biophilia. there's a special connection between nature and humans, and we need to try to um, make that connection again. We're kind of losing it, standing behind our cell phones and computers and all that other stuff. We got to get back to nature and start talking to them once more. Okay. And with this, also with this biophilia, some people believe too that we have an inherent, uh, animals have an inherent right to exist. Okay. Oh, sorry about that, folks. Something went off on my phone here. We have a. Let me turn this off. Sorry. We have an inherent right. They have an inherent right to exist. So that is another ethical decision you need to talk about to yourself. We talked about that in the beginning with the anthropocentric, anthropocentric to biocentric, all right, feeling, whether or not animals do have a right to live. There's actually a case out in Ohio right now where people were saying that Lake Erie has rights, and they're trying to give the rights for Lake Erie as an entity to be able to live. And there's a biodiversity. They're just trying to protect the biodiversity of Lake Erie by giving Lake Erie those rights. So the alteration of ecosystems creates winners and losers. I tell you what, we are going to stop at this one. All right, that's looks good, and we'll talk about the extinctions going on, the next mass extinction going on next time, and the different extinction levels. All right, so let's call it quits for this one. Remember, to Wednesday you'll have that current event due, and then next Wednesday that you have a current event due, but then the test is going to pop up. All right, and I'll remind you next time too when I see it. All right, have a good day, guys.